Everyone. I'm going to answer today this question which I'm often asked, that why did I start a school? And so let me start. I'll have to give you a little bit of history for that. As a student, in school I was a relatively, good student. So following the normal path, I picked up science in 11th and 12th, appeared for various engineering examinations, and got through to IIT, specifically IIT Bombay, where I did 5 years of metallurgical engineering and material sciences, with a dual degree, with a master's in ceramics and composites. Now, these terms sound interesting, but at the end of the day, actually I don't know much of it today. And the reason was that because very soon into IIT, I realized that I'm not very excited about engineering, and especially about metallurgical engineering and material sciences. So at IIT, I was busy with everything else except academics, and I would just before the examinations, I would just somehow manage to study for it and pass the examinations. However, at IIT I did so many other things which I couldn't do during schooling life. I was into a lot of cultural activities, literary activities, sports. In fact, in the first year at IIT, I played almost 16-17 sports at that point of time. I got into organization of events, specifically an event called TechFest at IIT Bombay, and it is now today, in fact, the largest festival, technology festival in India, in the Indian subcontinent, in fact. So I got busy with a lot of those things. And during that process, I got to know a lot of people. 3 seniors of mine from who I knew because of TechFest, in fact, were involved in the first campus startup in 1999 in India, first campus .com startup from India. And that, in fact, triggered my thoughts as to why that I can start up something on my own, that this is the kind of thing that I would like to do. And that stuck with me. So during those years, I also during my 4th and 5th year, I also worked with a company, another startup company from my campus. To get an exposure. In the last year, I did a lot of research on metallurgical and material science idea. It was called detonation spray coating systems. It's something like powder coating, but a little different. So I researched a lot about it. I thought, this is the kind of this is something that I could do, start up, because it was a new technology. It was coming up. There weren't too many units. But as I researched, I found out that I didn't have a lot of understanding about the business aspects of it. I didn't know how to go about starting that. So at that point of time, I decided to go to IIM Ahmedabad to get some more business understanding. That's also where I met Ankita, incidentally, Ankita had a similar experience with her own engineering. She really didn't enjoy. She's a computer science engineer from Bombay University, but she didn't really enjoy it. She didn't. Today she says that she can't even program to save her life, even though she's a computer science engineer. So by the time so in the first year at IIM Ahmedabad, I was also pretty much into the rat race, and this is despite being very sure that I'm going to IMA only to understand about business, and that is what I want to start off later on. So in the first year, I did pretty much join the rat race. I was into getting good grades for the sake of it, not really for learning. But we have this internship between the first year and second year, where I got placed with Procter & Gamble in their sales and marketing team. And while I was on the field, and I was essentially selling or understanding how to sell soaps and shampoos and various such products, I was thinking about this. When I met retailers, that if I have to sell soaps and shampoos, wouldn't I be better doing it on my own? Sitting as a retailer myself, running a kirana store on my own. And I thought that does make sense, because why should I sell soaps and shampoos for someone else? If it's something like that, then I would rather do it on my own. And with that thought in mind, I got back into the second year at IMA with a lot more zeal for entrepreneurship. Of course, it was helped in a big way by this course called Laboratory for Entrepreneurial Motivation, which is taken by Professor Sunil Handa. Who himself is a IMA alumnus, an entrepreneur, and he now runs this school called Eklavya School in Ahmedabad. So during this course, we got to meet a lot of entrepreneurs. We visited lots of places, lots of factories and places. We 11 of us from this course and a few others made a group in campus where we would meet together and talk about entrepreneurship and look at various possible ideas that we could start off in. We looked at everything from manufacturing to distribution to education as well, and so 4-5 of us formed a subgroup for education, where we said that okay, let us look at a school in greater detail. We had a lot of dialogue with Professor Sunil Handa, and over a period of time we were able to build some repository of knowledge. So during this second year, while we were researching on schools, we visited places like Jaipur and Navi Mumbai, also Surat, and of course my hometown is Delhi, so I was also there, and we were making a choice as to where we could start off something. And in that process we met we also met these 4-5 people I talked about earlier. We also met the Crossword franchisee in Baroda, and he also mentioned that we are also looking to start off something in Surat. And then we suddenly got this idea that okay, we can even start at look at starting a bookstore in Surat. So by the end of the second year, I essentially had decided that I want to start off something on my own. And within a month or so I packed up my bags and reached Surat and looked to start something on my own. However, the story I think of how I made the decision ultimately to start off on my own is very interesting, because given the environment I was in, so all IMA students get very good placements. I got a pre-placement offer from Procter & Gamble after the internship that I did with them. And being one of the top 25 percentile students at IMA, I would have got a very good offer from whichever field I wanted to get into. So towards the end of the second year, I had to make this decision whether I had to go ahead with placements or not, and I was struggling with it. I was talking to my parents and friends, and of course the majority of them had this viewpoint that it is safer to take up a job, work for a few years, and then start off on your own. Professor Sunil Handa, of course, was always of the opinion that you must start off immediately, because that's the most not necessarily the quickest way, but that's the time when you have the maximum risk taking capabilities to do so. So I met this friend at a wedding of a friend of a mutual friend, and he was from IIT Bombay, a batchmate from IIT Bombay, and his name was Saurabh Mittal, and he told me, I was telling him this dilemma of mine that should I set for placements, because I really want to start off, but a placement would be a little safer option, a fallback option in case I don't have something to start off immediately. And he said that if you really want to start off, then taking up a job should be the least of your priorities or your concerns. You just have to focus on starting off. And coming from him, it was something that struck me, because he was a serial entrepreneur of sorts himself. In 3 years, since graduating from IIT, he started off 2-3 ventures in IT and telecom, and success one or two successful ones, one or two not so successful ones. So that made me decide that yes, okay, I'm going to do it right away. Taking up a job would mean having a safety net, which then is very difficult to get over at times. And since then, I often get invited to colleges and I speak to students, and they ask me this question, that should we take a risk right away, or should we work for a little while, gain experience at someone else's cost, and then start up on their own. And I typically tell them that there is only one way of jumping off the cliff. You just have to jump off it. There is no simpler way per se of doing it. So that's how I decided to start on my own. I was looking at essentially a school and a bookstore as another option that I was looking at. In that meanwhile, in that during that duration, what also happened was I was the only person from my batch who did not take up placement, and I was also the placement coordinator of my batch. I also got a lot of media attention because of that. Because as I said earlier, not too many IMA graduates at that point of time were starting off or not taking a placement. So I got a lot of media attention, and with that came a lot of people with emails and letters, and who met me, who called me, who said that no, we would like to help you. This sounds very interesting. This sounds like something very good that you're doing. So I was at quite a high at that point of time. I thought that okay, yes, let me get to Surat, look for land, start off a school. It'll be done like in the next 3 months or 6 months or so. But as I got into this venture in detail, when I was in Surat, I realized that it's not an easy job, because essentially what I had was an idea on paper. There was no background that I had either in terms of having run a business on my own or being in education. So it wasn't easy for anyone to really come forward and show me or give the money or give land for me. Although I did a lot of research on that, and I got close to 2-3 deals or partnerships over the next 6 months with various people. One of them was in fact for a bookstore, a crossword franchise in Surat, but it didn't work out at the end of the day, and that was quite a low point for me in Surat. And I was living alone here. I have no family, immediate family or close people. I had 1 or 2 friends from college, from IIT, who I knew, and I was living with them for a little while. So it was quite a low point at that point of time, and I didn't really know how to move ahead. I didn't know what path to take next. In the meanwhile, I was also teaching MBA students. I was helping them out with CAT coaching at that point of time. So about 6 months into Surat, I was at a low point. I didn't know what to do. Coincidentally, at that point of time, Ankita and I decided to get married. And then we got thinking, and we started talking about why not start off with a preschool first. That's something that's manageable in terms of funding, in terms of size and scale, in terms of our own understanding about education. So that's what we then started looking at very seriously. We started looking at preschools, and we were in fact we looked at taking up a franchisee for Kangaroo Kids very seriously. We were into quite a detailed stage with them, and then at some point of time we realized that a franchisee of another brand is not something that we want to do, because we want to the whole reason why we got into education in the first place was because we wanted to bring about a change in what education is about. So it would make a lot more sense if we started off on our own. So that's what we decided to do. We decided to set up Fountainhead Preschool in Surat, from a small bungalow in the city. Over the next 6 months, from between October 2004 and February 2005, we worked on finalizing a place, getting it ready. In the meanwhile, Ankita got trained at Eklavya in their preschool, understanding what to do. Understanding the various educational philosophies such as Montessori and Steiner and Playway method. And I was setting up the infrastructure for a preschool. And then as we got into the preschool, we started off the preschool in April. We launched the preschool in April 2005. We had 6 students on the first day, and that the next 3 years were essentially we were focused on preschool, getting it really to work and happen during that period. And that I think was a very good learning experience for us, because we really understood children. We understood various philosophies. It gave us a lot of time to research about various educational matters, and that really made our lives easier when we actually started off with Fountainhead School. what also happened in the next 3 years was we were able to build up a brand of our own. We were able to, make a mark in the city that, okay, these Fountainhead is committed about, delivering good quality education. We were able to, by the end of third year, we had about 190 students. We'd expanded in terms of size while we were at the same location. So, and we then again started getting, a few offers, from people as to let's join hands and start off a school because that's what you want to do. Again, one of them, came very close, with a builder who had some land, and he had this idea that he wanted to start off a school. So with one of those builders, it came very close. We came very close to starting off. It ultimately, the builder didn't have trust, and we were also not very sure of whether he's the right person to go ahead with. In the meanwhile, we got introduced to Parag Shah, and who, as you know, is into the diamond industry. So we got introduced to him. So he was in fact trying to help us get government land. And in fact that's something that we had been trying for almost 2 years. We'd been making a lot of effort to get government land because they do have a so-called scheme. To give land. For educational institutes at a very low cost. So, but government being government, it was not really working out. In fact, when we met the minister, one of the ministers in the cabinet ministers, he himself said that the government land will take way too much time. So, it's better that you work it out on a different way. So then ultimately Parag in fact was then interested in starting off a school with us, and then our thoughts and ideas matched. His vision was to do something good for society in Surat, to give back to society, and that, and he said that, okay, you people seem to be the right people. He gave us that freedom and trust, that, okay, you decide what you want to do, and I will put in the funds and ensure that the school is, in terms of infrastructure and everything else, it's taken care of. And that's where we started off with Fountainhead School. The school started construction in about November 2007. The school was up in a record time in 8 months, by June 2008, and that was the first batch, in June 2008, that we started off with Fountainhead School. The next question that I'm going to be addressing now is why did we choose the primary years program, for Fountainhead School, from the IBO. And to address that, I will also talk about a little bit about what we thought about education, my own experiences with education, which in turn gave me a benchmark or a frame of reference to think about what education should look like. Alright, so let me talk about a little bit about my own experiences with education. As a student, as I said earlier, I was relatively a good student, but that's in terms of getting good marks and stuff like that. But I was also, I remember very distinctly that in the 7th, 8th standard, I was also very excited about education per se. Till that time I was excited. There was this camp that I did with the Astronomy and Astrophysics Center in Pune. I was in Pune at that point of time, and this was a camp where I really found science interesting. We did a lot of understanding about planetary motions. We understood how the sun's movements and the shadows made by it. And we did maths about it. I looked at sine theta and cos theta related to it. So it was a lot of science and maths which I really enjoyed. I looked forward to almost 7 or 8 weeks of those camps. I really looked forward to, and that was an exciting period for me. What I realized that other than that, in terms of academics, I was not really finding academics interesting. I remember that whenever there was experimentation involved in science, it would be exciting. When there was creative writing in language, it would be exciting. But most of the times I would not be enjoying my academics per se. And I was the kind of student who would not really study through the year much, but get study before the examinations, quite hard, and get reasonably good and okay marks. And that made me realize that there is something wrong with the way we are being educated. Of course, at that point of time, I was not really thinking about starting a school, but it did made me think that there is something wrong with the education. That something different could be done. So I was also educated in a number of schools. My father was in a transferable job. Till all throughout my academic, life till I was 21. So we would shift almost every 2 years or 3 years, and so I have studied in schools. Across India. I was also in Nigeria for 2 years, so I studied in school there. So and 11th and 12th, I was in supposedly one of the best schools in India. Delhi Public School, R.K. Puram. So across my schooling experience, I didn't find, the excitement, the exposure that I thought, I should really be getting as a student. I knew I was good at sports, but I never really got a lot of opportunity to, to get into sports in a big way. Partly because I was shifting every 2 to 3 years, but also because the schools to which I went, supposedly even though they were amongst the best, weren't really offering a lot of sporting opportunities. With the focus primarily being on academics. So all this give this reference to me when I actually started thinking about starting a school seriously. That these are the things that shouldn't be happening in this particular way. Then of course the question was that if these are the things that shouldn't be happening in a school, then how should things happen in a school? And as I mentioned earlier, we were researching into preschooling a lot. We were looking at Montessori and Steiner, and we were looking at playway methods. And we're trying to understand that what is good education, what should a good education look like. And during this process, during this process, when we were looking at starting off a school, we were in the beginning very focused on starting off with an ICSE school, because Eklavya school in fact is an ICSE school, so that's where we were influenced from. The ICSE curriculum is known to be a little better, from the other curriculums in general, from even CBSE to some extent a little more rigorous. At the same time, it offers you more opportunities to do things the way you do, because ICSE doesn't have recommended textbooks till the 7th or 8th standard. So we were looking at ICSE, but somehow we also came across the PYP. While I was looking up on the internet, we came across the IBO, the International Baccalaureate Organization. I already knew about the IBO, specifically one school called the Mahindra United World College. This is in Pune, which started off in 1997. So they essentially offer the IB diploma program for the 11th and 12th, and they're a truly international school in the sense that they have about 70% students from outside India, of all kinds of various nationalities. So I had some inkling of what the IBO is about in terms of what sort of a framework they have. So I started looking up in detail, and I found the IBO very interesting as a whole. Yeah, so the PYP of course is a much younger program. It started off in 1994, I think, and however the IB diploma program is a much older program, started off in 1968 out of Geneva, of an association of international schools, and now it has spread across the world. So while we were looking at the PYP, visited a few schools, looked up on the internet. We did a introductory workshop at Pathways International School in Gurgaon for the PYP. This was an official regional workshop held by the IBO. So while we were understanding this, we realized that this is the right thing. This is what we've been looking for in terms of education. And what are those things that attracted us to the PYP? I'll just talk about that in a little detail. Of course, you will be looking at each of those segments that I talk about today, about the PYP in greater detail in the coming few days. But this is just to give you an idea as to what attracted us to the PYP in the first place. So I've been talking about how we looked up the PYP, what research did we do about the PYP. What we also need to understand that as we were understanding the PYP, we also understood that the PYP is a costly program to offer, as well as a difficult program to offer. However, there were some compelling reasons that we found to offer the PYP, and those compelling reasons essentially is the framework that PYP brings along. The transdisciplinary framework, the inquiry based approach, the real emphasis on the learner profile attributes, which essentially I think is the cornerstone of education in terms of value education, as well as what we would like students to be as adults, as citizens, in the world. So even if you look at, for example, the IBO's mission statement, it talks so beautifully about, what they want to achieve with students, and that's something which really, attracted us to the PYP, as well as, their way of approaching the inquiry. the inquiry, of course, was something which was probably the most attractive thing for me, because I always understood that as a child I was I was a curious person. I would ask a lot of questions, and I think that's not just true about me as a child. It's true about almost every child. I mean, in the age group of 3, 4, 5. It's only once they get into school where they don't have the opportunities to ask questions, or even if they ask questions, they're not answered, or they're not helped to answer those questions. It happens that students, I mean, become less and less curious. So when it is about the PYP being an inquiry-based program, made it really exciting for us. It was a complete approach, a holistic approach, and importantly, PYP. I mean, when we looked at the PYP documentation, and you'll come across what our teachers refer to the PYP Bible, so to say, the making the PYP happen. Guidelines. You will see that PYP has referenced almost all the major philosophies, educational philosophies, from Vygotsky to Piaget to Montessori to Steiner. To Reggio Emilia approach, project approach. So they have been doing a lot of research on their own over the years. They have come up with a framework using these various approaches which they think should be taken across into the school. So then once we were understanding this, we thought that since we agree with the framework, essentially, why reinvent the wheel? Why not go in with the PYP as a ready-made program, so to say. However, what's also good about the PYP is that in the last 3 to 4 years that I have known PYP, they themselves have changed some of the things that they're doing. The core and the essential remain the same, but some of the approaches are changing, and which also means that the PYP and the IBO is a learning organization, so they are willing to experiment and change the way that the curriculum framework as well as the pedagogy. The other thing that was very good about the PYP was the kind of support that they offer in the implementation of the program. The PYP mandates that we have that some of our people go and attend regional workshops that they do in India or in Asia Pacific region, as well as they also want us to do in-school workshops where the whole teaching staff comes together to learn about the PYP and various topics from teaching and learning to assessments to making the PYP happen, and we'll look at more and more advanced topics over the years. So apart from the workshops, they also offer a lot of help in terms of consultation. It's a very rigorous process of authorization. It's almost a 3.5 year process. For us, it started off with sending them an interested school application in November 2007 to getting an authorization now in February 2011. Between that time, there were 3 visits from them. The preliminary visit in August 2008, where it was just to understand that is the school oriented towards a successful PYP program. Then there was a pre-authorization visit in December 2009 where they talked about the implementation, looked into in detail, and the final visit in January 2011 where that was a very rigorous evaluation. So these reasons, so these 2 main reasons were why the PYP looked very exciting for us, and that's why we went ahead and decided to go in with the PYP. Now, as I was saying earlier, that not only is PYP a costly program, but it is also a very challenging program. Plus the fact that being in Surat, the IBO and the PYP were really unknown. Even today, people don't know what the IBO and the PYP stands for in Surat, and even 3 years, 4 years back, they didn't absolutely know anything. Had we been an ICSE school, parents we would probably have got a lot more students. It is despite, that we chose the PYP. And as I said, despite, 2 huge facts, not 3 huge facts, in fact, let me put it this way. One was that the PYP, was unknown. The PYP and the IBO were relatively unknown in Surat. Second, that it would have been a costlier program for us to offer, and therefore also costlier for the parents to afford. And the third, I mean, the fact that, I mean, the PYP in terms of implementation is a very difficult program, because the kind of framework that it requires, the framework that it mandates requires a huge amount of resources, huge amount of training, the teachers to really unlearn, I mean, everything that they were doing, I mean, to start teaching, I mean, a very different way altogether. So despite, I mean, these three important challenges, I mean, we still decided to go ahead with the PYP because of our belief, I mean, in what the PYP, I mean, means for in terms of educational, I mean, implementation inside the classroom. So I just talked about these three challenges, I mean, that we face, that, I mean, the various stakeholders face. The challenges that parents face, I think, is not just about, I mean, it's not just about not knowing PYP. Even if you, I mean, as parents, they get to know the PYP, I mean, there are still a number of challenges for parents that they face. I will talk about a little more briefly about the challenges faced by the school and by teachers, I mean, as individuals, as teachers. I just mentioned the fact about that for teachers, the learning, I mean, that they need to do is, I mean, very important. See, all of us, let us understand that all of us have not, I mean, looked at the PYP or have not studied the PYP ourselves. I mean, we've all, majority of us have studied in very conventional schools. I mean, some better than the others, but I mean, still very conventional schools. So for us, I mean, to teach in this particular way, or teach in a completely different manner requires a lot of unlearning, and which is difficult. I mean, it is very easy for most of us as individuals, and it's very natural human tendency to fall back on what you already know, or the way you've already experienced it. So that's one major challenge, I mean, that we need to I mean, look at for teachers, that they really need to be ready to unlearn, and that's something that all of you need to be ready for, I mean, in the next few days and in the next few years that you're here at Fountainhead. The other, I mean, dilemma or the other challenge that as teachers also face is coming to a philosophical level agreement, I mean, with the PYP, because the PYP talks says, for example, I mean, that memorization or rote memorization is not important. Now, again, it's because of our conditioning, I mean, with the Indian education system, that we have so much importance on, I mean, rote memorization, that, for example, for us, it is still very difficult to get over it, I mean, when we start teaching ourselves. So there are a number of, I mean, small and large, I mean, philosophical agreements, I mean, that we keep coming across. For example, area where there is a lot of philosophical disagreement, I mean, at times, is the classroom management or how we deal with children. So again, we have this conditioning that discipline means A, B, C, X number of things, whereas, I mean, and here it's not just about the PYP, but as a school we believe that disciplining needs to be, I mean, very different from what we have been used to, and we will talk about again that in greater detail. So now those are important things where at an individual level there could be, I mean, a disagreement with what happens, and especially what happens, and sometimes what also happens is, while you may principally agree with, I mean, the philosophy of what you're doing and how you're doing it, but you often don't get the results, I mean, as you expect, and then at those points of time you again start questioning whether, I mean, you are thinking right or whether you're doing the right thing. But what we have to realize is that, I mean, the PYP as well as, I mean, the school, I mean, is a learning journey which will take some time, and things are not going to necessarily be perfect at even, I mean, at the end of 10 years. It is always going to be evolving a learning process, and this is something that as members of, I mean, as members of Fountainhead community, all of us have to be very, very open-minded, that we are and be lifelong learners, that we are going to be learning, I mean, throughout our association with Fountainhead School. As a school, we aim for excellence. I mean, that's one of our core values, organizational values. And what happens, I mean, with the learning, I mean, process is that, you're often aware of how ideally things should be well before, I mean, you are able to achieve that. And that for teachers, I mean, and as for a Fountainhead community, I think it can be a very frustrating and challenging experience, because you've seen videos or you've heard in workshops or you've talked to, I mean, teachers outside, and you know that the PYP can work in this particular manner, or discipline can look, I mean, so beautiful, I mean, in the right manner. But we are not yet there. So I think there it is important to realize that, I mean, the journey, I mean, to becoming a good school and to a good teacher is a slow process, is a time consuming process. It's not going to happen immediately, either for individuals or for, I mean, the school as a whole, for the organization as a whole. So in excellence, I think what we should be looking for, I mean, importantly on a day-to-day basis, on a month-to-month basis, is are we doing better today than what we were doing, I mean, a few days back or a few weeks back. I think that is the journey of excellence that we should be, I mean, talking about, and we shouldn't get, I mean, too overwhelmed or challenged or frustrated, I mean, about the big gap between what we think about what ideally things can be and where things stand today. And that also brings me to the challenge that we face as a school. So as I said, I mean, we need teachers who have all these qualities, I mean, that I just talked about. And the reality at this point is that teaching is not, unfortunately, a very, I mean, valued profession. So that also brings us a lot of, brings a lot of challenges for us as a school, because sometimes, I mean, while the person, I mean, in terms of caliber is right, the commitment levels are not there, and sometimes it is the opposite, where the commitment is there, we are not able to find the right quality. So finding, I mean, teachers who have both, I mean, commitment as well as, I mean, the caliber is perhaps the biggest challenge that we face today as a school, I mean, and going on, I mean, for us, it is important that we are able to maintain the same quality, I mean, and commitment in our teaching inside the classroom, and that, I think, is the biggest challenge. Of course, there are other challenges in terms of, I mean, managing the resources, managing the growth of the organization, managing teams, but those are all things that I think we are either equipped already to do it, or else we are in the process of equipping ourselves. And for us, so the biggest challenge for us remains the teachers and and their training and their commitment inside the classroom, and that is something that both Ankit and I are most committed to ensuring that it happens. In fact, the whole series of sessions that you're going to be seeing as part of your training, we want is one of the ways of ensuring that, I mean, that every teacher, I mean, before she gets into the classroom, has a certain amount of, I mean, knowledge in terms of the theories, as well as some exposure to the classroom before she gets into the classroom. Because let us also understand that being a PYP teacher can be a little overwhelming at times. But this is exactly why we are trying to make sure that you are well equipped as teachers over a period of, I mean, a few days, I mean, a few weeks, so that you can handle the challenges that you're going to be facing, I mean, inside the classroom. To me, that brings us to the end of the session. I mean, this session where I've talked about why we wanted to get into a schooling and why we've chosen PYP, and some of the challenges that today we are facing, I mean, as a PYP school. I'll see you for the next session. Thank you.